Hello and welcome to another Hangout by Bright Ideas Press. I'm Jimmy Landley, your hostess for the day, and I have with me today Tyler Hogan, the president of Bright Ideas Press and a homeschool dad. Tyler today is going to be discussing the topic of early high school graduation. So we're talking about homeschoolers that are a little advanced and they want to go ahead and graduate from high school and move on with their plans. I think today's topic is mostly going to be focusing on going to college, and Tyler will be sharing a lot of personal details from his own experience. So Tyler, dig in and start telling us, why do homeschoolers even need to consider this idea of graduating early?
Well, homeschoolers have the opportunity to graduate earlier than most of their public school counterparts. If you have a academically advanced student, in a lot of states, it's not that hard to get all the requirements of graduation under your belt by the time you're 15 or 16, as opposed to 17, 18, or in some cases 19 or or older, as the case might be. So because you have that opportunity, it begs the question: is this a good idea? We don't want to fall into that trap of just because we can do it, we will do it. We need to stop and ask, is this a good idea? And I think the answer is going to be different for every family. For some people, this is going to be a great opportunity, wouldn't want to miss it. For other people, it could be disastrous. So I think it's really important to dig in there and look at the wisdom on a case-by-case basis. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer to that question.
So
But there are
this is something that you
significant.
did?
Yes, it's a little bit of a family tradition, especially on my mom's side of the family, to graduate early. My older brother, graduated when he was 15. I graduated when I was 16, and JB and I both went to college right off the bat. For my older brother, it ended up not being a great fit for him to go to school that young, so he didn't stay and finish his 4 years all at once at that first college that he went to. For me, it worked out really well. It was just a better fit, and I was a little bit older too, so I think that helped a lot. So there are a lot of advantages, but there's also some pretty significant pitfalls that need to be pretty carefully considered. So I'm just going to share a little bit about my experience, and hopefully that'll help as other families are making decisions. Now, if you're not looking at college, there's a whole realm of other possibilities that are worth looking into. And some of these principles might apply, but certainly not all of them. I would encourage you, if you're looking at alternatives to a conventional four-year college, to go ahead and look at Embark, which is a product that we developed earlier this year that has just a whole slew of great workshops from experts on all kinds of high school and college topics. And there's a lot of talk about alternatives to college and preparing for college and things like that. So look up Embark at the brightideaspress.com website, and that might help you if that's the direction that you're looking into. But so for my story, like I said earlier, I graduated when I was 16, almost 17. And I was very into mime and theater ministry as a teenager. So I was looking for a place that I definitely wanted to go to a Christian school, and I wanted to study theater from a biblical worldview and pursue theater ministries. That ended up not being my career, but I think I still make good use of that degree because a lot of what I learned had to do with managing people, managing projects, working on deadlines, working on a shoestring budget, those kinds of things that they really apply almost in any kind of situation. So regardless of whether or not theater was exactly the best choice, the school that I went to is called Belhaven University, and I chose it because they were one of the very few schools at the time that had a Christian theater program and with an emphasis in theater ministries. So in terms of my experience there, the academics were the easy part. I was a very academic student. I loved my classes. I loved digging into the texts and working with my professors. And I think for a lot of homeschoolers who are looking at early graduation, they'll probably find that that's the case as well. If you're academically minded, college is probably not going to be that much harder than your high school work. And the other easy part was, independent living and handling responsibility. I didn't have a car on campus, but my parents had really spent a lot of time preparing me for being on my own. How to do my own laundry, how to cook, how to interact with people, how to, take care of my own taxes and that kind of thing. Those were the sorts of things that my parents paid a lot of attention to. So, the logistics and the being independent and handling deadlines and responsibilities. I mean, there were challenges to that, but it wasn't altogether that difficult. Um, we had done a lot of that work at home, and my parents had let me do a lot of traveling and missions work as a teenager. So even just being on my own without my parents around was something I was already kind of used to. Logistically, there were a few challenges here and there. There were extra steps when I had to go visit the school nurse, to get medical treatment. There's parental release forms that have to be signed that if you're already 18, you don't have to worry about that. Going overseas on a missions trip, there are extra forms for that. And, they wanted to know, well, why are you taking a 17-year-old to Italy? I mean, that just looks kind of weird. But honestly, those weren't a big deal. It was just a minor hurdle. Spiritually speaking, the spiritual side of being on my own at age 16, it wasn't easy, but it was good. My parents had given me the best preparation that they knew how, and I mean, they had good reasons to be confident that my faith would grow and not shrink in that environment. Belhaven is a great college. I loved it there. Very strong faculty and staff. Very well grounded. They have a biblical worldview. It's not just one of those kind of historically Christian or Christian in name only kind of colleges. The faculty and staff really take their faith seriously and personally and communicate it to the students. Now, you didn't have to have a statement of faith signed in order to be a student there. So you had all kinds of students, but the staff and faculty did have a shared statement of faith, and that really showed through. So honestly, the biggest danger to my spiritual life while I was at college wasn't from the environment. It was more from, the the illusion of maturity feeding my pride, which is something that, if you're a 15-year-old going off to college, it's easy to think of yourself way too highly. And I have a workshop that I do called Confessions of a Homeschool Graduate, where I share a lot more about that and how that got dealt with, particularly in my junior year. But honestly, the spiritual side, like I said, it was hard, but it was good, and I wouldn't trade that. The most difficult part of being away, and Belhaven was very far away. It was 1,000 miles away from my parents. So it wasn't the kind of situation where I was living at home and going to college. It wasn't, home is just a hour or 2 hour drive away and I'm home on weekends. It was, no, you're in Mississippi and you're staying there and we'll see you at Thanksgiving. And this was, before FaceTime and everything. So the hardest part of being that far away from everyone that I had known was the social side. And like I said, the staff and faculty were great, and it was a good environment, amazing teachers and mentors. But the student body was a real mixed bag. You had some people who were, real strong believers, loved the Lord, and then you had plenty of people there who were not at all interested in spiritual things or antagonistic towards spiritual things. If you weren't a Christian, you had to tell them on your application why you wanted to attend a Christian school. And the reasons for that varied wildly. Some people, it was just, hey, this is a local college with a good reputation. And other people, who knows what their reasons were, or if they even knew. But because of that, there's plenty of non-Christian activity that a sheltered little homeschooled teenager, just really wasn't prepared for and didn't know what to do with when I encountered them, aside from, try and avoid certain people. So something that I think maybe if I could do it over again with my parents is we might have spent some more time talking about strategies for how do you handle some of those sticky situations that didn't come up in our little homeschool co-op. What do you do when you find out that your friend is getting drunk or high over the weekend, or when your roommate tells you that he's gay, or how to handle it when your classmate drops out because she got pregnant and you run into them at church or at Walmart, and it's, how do you handle that kind of awkward conversation? Um, or, dealing with a roommate or a classmate in a group project who's on the autism spectrum, or even, I mean, some of those are really big things, but some of them are little. Like, how do you handle what's the most diplomatic way to request that the TV not be blaring in the background all day long while you're trying to study? And between my friends and I, we ran into all of those things, even at a Christian college. So, and it was really a hit or miss for us if we handled them well, if we handled them poorly, if we handled them lovingly, or if we didn't handle it at all and was just avoided. So that was honestly the most difficult part of it for me, because people are just so unpredictable. And Belhaven was a small school. I mean, there weren't more than 1,200 students on campus, and a lot of those were commuters. So, it's a pretty tight-knit group of people. You recognize everybody when you're walking down the halls, and, when awkward things come up, how do you handle that? That was a big thing that I wish I had been better prepared for, those kinds of situations. There were people there who, they saw me clean-cut homeschool teenager, and they made it their goal to try and corrupt me. It sounds silly and ridiculous, but it happened. And how are you supposed to handle that kind of thing? And then the other factor, socially speaking, was it was hard to gain people's respect and trust when they found out how old you were. If and I'm talking about peers, not faculty. The faculty were great. They didn't give you any hard times about being the youngest person there. But when it's your junior year and there are incoming freshmen who are older than you on a regular basis, that can just be a little bit awkward. It can make those group projects have a different feel and dynamic, when everybody knows how young you are. So I tried to hide that as much as I could and, just not bring it up. But, word gets around, and people don't just forget that kind of thing.
It's amazing how 2 years age difference is thing when you're talking about 15, 16, 17, 18. The older you get, the less it matters, but it does matter at that
Mm-hmm.
age.
Yeah, it really does.
So
Yeah,
based on your experience, what are the pros and the cons? What would you alert parents to when they're trying to make this decision about early graduation?
So the big pro was graduating with my bachelor's when I was 20 years old. And, if I had decided at that time I wanted to go for a master's, I could have had that finished and under my belt by the time most people are still finishing up their bachelor's degrees. So, I mean, that's a big motivation. I was 20 and I was ready to get on with life. I had graduated, I got a job, I got married, all within that same year, and I was ready for it. So if you're ready, there's not really a whole lot of sense to just hold someone back for no particular reason. I had as much maturity as a 20-year-old could have at that time, and I was ready to take on the responsibilities. I was prepared financially. So, just holding me back wouldn't have made any sense for an extra 2 years. So I saved not just the time in getting my degree, but I got to have 2 extra years of adulthood rather than participating in that kind of prolonged adolescence model that colleges are famous for. I mean, the biggest con was some less than optimal flavor for some of my relationships and encounters with people. But honestly, for me, it was totally worth it, and I wouldn't have traded that experience for anything. Now, there are some factors that could have been different and influenced how my experience had been, that are worth considering to see if any of these impact your own situation. For me, being 1,000 miles away from home really changed the experience. It might not have made things better if I had been closer. It would have definitely had an impact. I can't say if it would have been positive or negative, part of the benefit for me was being on my own and not under my parents' roof. I wanted that independence. I was craving that. And so getting to live on my own, that was one of the pros. But for some people, that's not necessarily a pro. For some people, being under their parents' roof for a longer period of time is fine, or even a preferable thing. It's not for everybody, but it's something to think about. So if you're in a situation where you're looking at, you know, primarily taking online classes or going to a local campus rather than going far away from home, that's going to change the conversation. And because a lot of that just has to do with what influences are surrounding you. You know, what culture are you immersed in all day, every day? If you're at home and spending your day on campus surrounded by campus culture, that's different than being at home and participating in online classes, but you're primarily in your home culture. You know, those are going to be very different experiences. Another thing that can really make a big difference in how you process the whole experience of graduating early is whether or not you go to a secular or a minimally religious or a very religious school. You know, I was really grateful for the experience I had. I know people who have been to all kinds of universities and have had good experiences there. But for me, you know, being 16, going somewhere that had a strong biblical worldview, that was really, really important for me. I didn't want to have to go somewhere where a 16-year-old kid is going to be perpetually intellectually assaulted, you know, and some people have had that kind of experience, and that was very difficult, and that's not what I wanted for my college. You know, I think about my kids, and you know, I have no idea what they're going to want to do when they grow up, but if they want to go to a secular school, you know, I will be more comfortable if it's close by. You know, that whole combination of influences really has to be taken into account. My parents knew that they would have less day-to-day influencing opportunities on my life, but they knew the environment would be a positive one, so that made it okay for them. Sending a 16-year-old to an anti-Christian campus far removed from home, I mean, that sounds like it's probably going to be a poor choice for most people. And I'd say one other factor I think that really contributed to me having such a positive experience there was I had direction. You know, I had a reason for being there. I never changed majors. They say the average college student changes majors, what, like 7 times before they graduate, which to me is incredible. I mean, how do you how do you even do that? But I know people who have done that, and it takes longer. And sometimes it's for really good reasons, but a lot of times it's mostly just because they didn't have a clear direction when they went in the first place. I knew that I wanted to be there at Belhaven studying that particular topic. And if I didn't have that, it could have been a lot longer, a lot less positive. I mean, I had friends there who spent 8 years getting their bachelor's degree because they couldn't settle on a major and stick with it. And that, I mean, that changes the whole conversation too. If you've got a 16-year-old who's just aimless and doesn't know what to do with himself, you know, maybe a better option would be local community college where you're just getting your general education requirements out of the way and have some time to figure out, you know, what's the passion and mission of my life going to be, where I can figure out what degree will best serve me
Mhm,
there.
mhm.
So, I
Those
mean,
are
all of
great
those.
things. I'm
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was saying those are great things to think about, and, what else should parents ask themselves when they're trying to make this decision? I'm sure you've got some more hooks for these parents.
Well, so the first question that I would ask as a parent is, first off, is college definitely the plan? And if that's something where you don't have an absolute yes for that, then I again refer you back to Embark. The next question is early graduation the logical next step, or are we rushing through needed growth? One of the things my parents did with me, just because of the way my credits worked out, you know, I started getting credits early enough and took enough classes early on that if they had wanted to, they could have graduated me at 15, but they chose to hold me back a year. And I know that sounds so weird, but they held me back a year and had me graduate at 16 instead because there were growth opportunities that they didn't want to miss. You know, they wanted to have that year with me to help develop me spiritually, to help give me some more experience with some things that I was interested in. It was it would have been rushed to send me a year before that, even though technically it would have been feasible. So just because you can, is there a lot of growing that needs to happen in a certain area? And if you've already got your credits out of the way, then use some extra time to develop the character, to spend some time focusing on particular areas of interest. That might be really helpful. The next three questions would be, is my student prepared academically? And if not, maybe you take that extra year to focus on those problem areas. Is my student prepared spiritually? If you're not prepared spiritually, it can be really disastrous going into an unsupervised kind of environment like that. And then, is my student prepared socially? Have we had those awkward conversations? Have we done the role play exercises? Have we talked about how you handle, X, Y, and Z situation? And more of those are going to come up. I mean, the conversations I'm going to have with my kids are nothing like the conversations my parents needed to have with me. I mean, it's only going to get more complicated. So make sure that you've actually spent the time and invested in some of those long, heavy, heady, awkward talks, because they're worthwhile, they're important. And as awkward as they may be, they're memorable, not just because they're awkward, but they I don't know, maybe it is just because they're awkward, but even if it is just because they're awkward, they are memorable and the lessons do stick. So don't feel like just because they're awkward, they're not a good teaching moment. It's a great teaching moment. And then I would also want to ask, will the environment at our chosen school be likely to help or to harm our student at this stage in their life? And if it's going to harm them, then maybe look for 3 or 4 other options in the same field. There's plenty of places to go, plenty of things to do. And then one other question that I would ask, that this wasn't something that we dealt with, but if your student is going to be staying at home, how are you going to navigate that? Once a student goes from at home in high school to at home in college, there's a significant relational shift that happens, whether you want it to or not. And it should happen. It's supposed to happen. As students are gaining towards adulthood, they're gaining independence. They need to be taking responsibility. And are you, as a parent, prepared to give them both the responsibility and the independence? I've seen a lot of young men who they're staying at home, and there's good, valid reasons for them not to leave the house quite yet. But if you're, 22 years old and living at home, your relationship with your parents is going to be very different than it was 4 or 6 years ago. And you have to figure out, how are we going to handle curfew and chore schedules? Do we expect you to be home for dinner? When is it important for you to call? All of those things have to be discussed. And as parents, our goal should be, we want to prepare our kids for adulthood. I don't want to hold on to my kids any longer than they need to be held. I want them to be ready to fly. And I need to make sure that I'm not holding them back with my wanting them to be close to me. So if they're staying at home, you got to figure out how you're going to navigate that. What are the rules, roles, responsibilities, expectations, and make sure that those are really clearly communicated, and that you have a goal in mind for all of those things. So yeah, so those are some of the questions I'd ask.
Those are great, Tyler. So in wrapping this up, what is the next step for a parent who is grappling with this question? What would you recommend they do right now to get more clarity?
Listen to Embark.
Okay, tell us, where can we find Embark? What is this Embark?
Embark is a webinar that we did this past year, back in February, and it's all about the high school years and how to help prepare your student academically, spiritually, and logistically for college and career. So you can find it at brightideaspress.com. There's a big banner that says Embark right on the homepage, and it's got a great workbook that you can go through, places to take notes. There's hours and hours of great audio content from a lot of fantastic speakers. So I think you'll find it really, really helpful, no matter what your college or post-graduation plans are.
And isn't there a Facebook group that goes along with the purchase?
There is, yep. If you purchase Embark, you are inducted into our private Facebook community. And our speakers from the workshop are there, and they're happy to field questions, and you can chat with the other moms and dads who are part of the Embark community.
So again, go to brightideaspress.com, look in the top navigation menu, and you'll see Embark Conference. If for some reason you don't see that, you can simply search the word embark, as in, to set off in a ship, and you will find that product. It is only $39. That is 18 hours of audio, includes PowerPoint presentations from the talks, PDF downloads and guides, and access to that Facebook group. So it's an amazing value for $39. It's going to give you a lot of peace of mind about making some of these decisions for your high schooler. It is a very emotional time of life as a parent, a Christian homeschool parent.
So I've heard.
But it is. I'm there. I have a senior who's graduating in just a few months, and it is a very exciting and wonderful time, but you do need that extra guidance. And so I encourage everyone to check out Embark, and that Facebook group is going to also help support you through these months and years to come. So thank you, Tyler, for sharing your personal experiences about early high school graduation. And we trust that to the audience out there watching, that it will be really helpful to you as you make that decision.
Yeah, early graduation, it can be such a great way to prepare students to dive into their new responsibilities and challenges and to achieve their goals. It's certainly not for everybody, but I think there are a lot more people who could benefit from it than are currently benefiting from it. So yeah, think through these questions, listen to Embark, and hopefully that'll help you make a wise decision.
It's a great topic and great advice. Thank you, Tyler, again. And so that'll wrap it up for today. It was great being with everybody. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care.